Happy Sabbath. I hope you all enjoy your week. And today I continue to ask our loving Jesus to bless us, to be with us, and to be a constant companion in our life, to provide us protection, love, joy, and peace. Last week, the story of Joseph ended with Judah pleading passionately for the release of Benjamin. He told Joseph, the prime minister, in some detail that the loss of Benjamin would severely affect his father, and that he had already guaranteed the safe return of Benjamin to his father. And Joseph even offered himself as a slave in Benjamin's place. Judah wanted to prevent his father from suffering more grief. Remember, Jacob grieved for a long time when he thought Joseph was dead. This heartfelt appeal of Judah for the safe return of Benjamin is in stark contrast to his proposal 20 years ago to sell his brother Joseph as a slave. What a difference. We observe a very different Judah. And to read it deeper, we can see Judah had demonstrated the self-sacrificing love like Christ, voluntarily suffer punishment for someone else. Now let us begin reading chapter 45, starting verse 1. And this is after Judah's appeal to Joseph now. Okay, let me read. Then Joseph could not control himself before all those who stood by him. He cried, "Make everyone go out from me, so no one stay with me," when Joseph made himself known to his brother. And he wept aloud, so that the Egyptian heard it, and the household of Pharaoh heard it. And Joseph said to his brothers, "I am Joseph. Is my father still alive?" But his brothers could not answer him, for they were dismayed at his presence. So Joseph ordered all the Egyptians out of the room, and then was alone with his brothers, and he wept aloud. His great emotion is the letting go and release of years of pain and yearning for his family. Clearly, Joseph still loves his family. And the tests given to his brothers were not for the purpose of revenge, to make his brothers suffer. Scholars deduce that the tests actually were inspired by God, and they were necessary experience for the brothers, so that they could reflect on the wicked things that they had done, and to recognize that their character is flawed and the need to change and to grow. And for Joseph, I feel he had already decided to bring his father and younger brother to live with him. But for his older brothers, he needed to know whether their character had changed and whether they were trustworthy before he could offer them the place of Goshen to live with their families. And in case you haven't been following the story, Joseph's older brothers passed all the tests. And so Joseph finally told them he was Joseph and showed his brother that he was their brother. Maybe he removed his Egyptian headdress. You know, the Egyptian, they wear that thing, when you're official. And perhaps he even removed that dark eye paint on his eyes. The ancient Egyptian, both male and female, they paint their eyes. So the brothers were totally shocked. And they did not anticipate this revelation at all. The verse that they were dismayed. Well, the ancient Hebrew word for dismay means amazed, frightened, or even terrified. Now, verse 4. So Joseph said to his brothers, Come near to me, please. And they came near, and he said, I am your brother Joseph, whom you sold into Egypt. And now do not be distressed or angry with yourselves because you sold me here. For God sent me before you to preserve life. For the famine has been in the land for these 2 years, and there are still yet 5 years in which there will be neither plowing nor harvest. And God sent me before you to preserve for you a remnant on earth, and to keep alive for you many survivors. So it was not you who sent me here, but God. He has made me a father to Pharaoh, and Lord of all his house, and ruler over all the land of Egypt. A father to Pharaoh, meaning an advisor to Pharaoh. Well, Joseph told the brothers to come near to him. Perhaps they were so shocked that they stepped back a few steps in terror. Well, Joseph didn't just say to the brothers, I am your brother Joseph. See, in this passage, he said, I am Joseph, whom you sold in Egypt. He included the predicate, whom you sold into Egypt, indicate he did not cover up the evil things that they did 20 years ago, pretend that nothing has happened. He wanted them to realize what they did was wicked and sinful. But nevertheless, he comforted them, telling them that though the deed was evil, but God allowed it to serve a purpose, a greater purpose. Well, let me pause a bit before I read the next verse. I have an observation and a question here. Observation: when we become the victim of injustice, or when someone sinned against us, most of us are tempted to do these. We are either tempted to pretend that the offending party never did it, or number two, we are tempted to ignore the fact that God's overarching hand is always there, whether we are enjoying a good time or enduring hardship. But Joseph recognized that. He pointed out to his brothers that the evil deed that they had done in 20 years ago, selling him to slavery, it was wicked. But God's providence was there, working out this mishap to save lives. And what's my question? Well, is it fair to ask, why was Joseph in Egypt? Was it because of the sin of his brothers, or because of the good plan of God? The answer is that both aspects were true. God, in his mysterious way, works out good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose. Romans 8:28. So let's continue reading. Joseph told his brothers, hurry and go up to my father and say to him, thus says your son Joseph, God has made me Lord of all Egypt. Come down to me, do not tarry. You shall dwell in the land of Goshen, and you shall be near me, you and your children and your children's children, and your flocks, your herds, and all that you have. There I will provide for you, for there are yet 5 years of famine to come, so that you and your household and all that you have do not come to poverty. And now your eyes see, and the eyes of my brothers Benjamin see, that it is my mouth that speaks to you. You must tell my father of all my honor in Egypt, and of all that you have seen. Hurry and bring my father down here. Then he fell upon his brother Benjamin's neck and wept. And Benjamin wept upon his neck. And he kissed all his brothers and wept upon them. After that, his brothers talked with him. Well, this was the message Joseph wanted his brothers to bring to their father. When Jacob eventually heard this, it was one of the greatest days of his life. He had the joy of learning that his favorite son Joseph is alive and is saving his life, his brothers' lives, and others' lives. Joseph kissed all his brothers and wept over them. In spite of what his brothers did in the past to him, Joseph was affectionate and loving to all his brothers. He also promised that he'll provide for them. After that, his brothers talked with him. This must have been a wonderful conversation. There was a lot to catch up on. Now, verse 16. When the report was heard in Pharaoh's house, Joseph's brother had come. It pleased Pharaoh and his servants. And Pharaoh said to Joseph, "Say to your brothers, do this, load your beasts, and go back to the land of Canaan, and take your father and your households, and come to me, and I will give you the best of the land of Egypt, and you shall eat the fat of the land. And you, Joseph, are commanded to say, do this, take wagons from the land of Egypt for your little ones and for your wives, and bring your father to come. Have no concern for your goods, for the best of all land of Egypt is yours." The sons of Israel did so, and Joseph gave them wagons according to the command of Pharaoh, and gave them provision for their journey. To each and all of them he gave a change of clothes, but to Benjamin he gave 300 shekel of silver and 5 changes of clothes. To his father he sent as follows: 10 donkeys loaded with good things of Egypt, and 10 female donkeys loaded with grain, bread, and provision for his father on the journey. Then he sent his brothers away, and as they departed, he said to them, "Do not quarrel on the way." Well, Pharaoh heard about all this and commanded Joseph to give them carts and provisions for the journey. The sons of Israel received transportation, provision, garments, and riches, because their once despised brother had become the prime minister of Egypt. Pharaoh blessed the son of Jacob because of what Joseph did for his nation. A biblical scholar, James Montgomery Boyce, said that the brothers returning to Canaan with carts from Egypt was cultural equivalent to today landing a jumbo jet with provision in a far away, isolated, remote village. So it was a big deal. And we also read from the passage that Joseph gave each brother a change of clothing, but to Benjamin he gave 5 changes of clothes, plus 300 shekels of silver. In a sense, Joseph still wants to see whether his brothers would be jealous of this special treatment to Benjamin. Furthermore, what a contrast it was 20 years ago. The brothers sold Joseph for 20 shekels of silver. Now he is able to give 300 shekels of silver to his younger brother Benjamin. It shows that through it all, Joseph, although experienced evil, mistreatment, but God turned the evil to good. When Joseph's brothers were leaving Joseph told them, "Don't quarrel on the way home." Well, Joseph was so afraid that as soon as his brothers leave his presence, they would be tempted to quarrel about who was responsible for the evil act of selling Joseph to slavery. Joseph wants them to guard against blaming each other, because all the wrong deeds are forgiven and God had blessed them. Verse 25. So they went up out of Egypt and came to the land of Canaan to their father Jacob. And they told him, Joseph is still alive, and he's ruler over all the land of Egypt. And his heart became numb, for he did not believe them. But when they told him all the words of Joseph, which he had said to them, and when he saw the wagons that Joseph had sent carry him, the spirit of their father Jacob revived. And Israel said, It is enough. Joseph, my son, is still alive. I will go and see him before I die. Jacob did not believe the brother when they told him Joseph was alive. If you recall, years ago, Jacob was told that Joseph was dead, and he believed it. And now when he was told Joseph was alive, he did not believe it until his sons told him the words of Joseph and showed him the wagons and provisions that came to them through Joseph. Then he believed Joseph was alive, though he had not yet seen him. Wow, what a chapter, what a story. Does this chapter teach us any spiritual lesson? You know, years ago, this rabbi, Jewish rabbi called Harold Kushner, wrote a remarkable, wide-selling book titled When Bad Things Happen to Good People. Maybe some of you have read it. Well, it sold more than 500,000 copies before going to paperback and was on the New York Times bestseller list for a whole year. Well, the whole point of his book was to say God is all-loving, but not all-powerful. That God is good, but not sovereign. So when bad things happen to good people, it is because events are out of God's control. Kushner advises reader to learn to love God and forgive him despite his limitation. Whatever Kushner described, it was not the God of the Bible. The actors in this story can prove that Rabbi Harold Kushner is wrong. The first actor is Joseph. Joseph realized God ruled his life. Not good men, not evil men, not circumstances or fate. God was in control. And because God was in control, all things worked together for good. The second actor, Jacob. At the end, Jacob said, It is enough. Joseph, my son, is still alive. A few chapters back, things were not going well for Jacob. He said everything was against him. He thought Joseph was dead, and there was famine in the land, and Simeon was stranded in an Egyptian prison. And then his older sons came to take Benjamin away to Egypt. But at the end, everything has turned around. Jacob said, It is enough. The blessing of Joseph alive is enough. And he finally realized God is good and God is in control. The third actors, the older brothers. The evil brothers became humble, considerate, and self-sacrificing, willing to give up their own lives for their younger brother. At the end, they could enjoy whatever blessing they had and not looking at each other with suspicious, jealous eyes and measuring who's getting more. They have changed, and it is God who has saved them from the downhill road of corruption. God, the amazing God, He is in control. So, we've been saying God sometimes answers our prayers through experiences. So how do we know that God is directing my experience in life? Well, Our experience is determined by our decisions, right? So we need to pray for Christ's abidance the very first thing in the morning, so that our thoughts, our decisions, and attitudes will be in sync with His will. Without me, Christ said, you can do nothing. His light, His life, His Spirit must be ours continually. We need Christ every hour. We cannot do without His presence even for one moment, because our enemy knows exactly when we are vulnerable and will take advantage of us and will influence our minds with his suggestions. Joseph is a very good example for us. During the 15 plus days of traveling with his captor from Dothan to Egypt, Joseph has some time to think and to reflect his life. He recalled his father's teaching and what Jacob, his father, had told him, how God had protected him and guided him through his years of exile. And we can see Joseph's turning point was here during his time of journeying to Egypt. He gave himself to God at this point and decided that in all circumstances, he would submit himself to the King of the universe. And that really had influenced his life, because even when Potiphar's wife relentlessly tempting him, Joseph again and again resisted her suggestion to sin. David also knew, remember King David, right? He knew the importance of surrendering himself to God first thing in the morning. He said, "My voice shalt thou hear in the morning, O Lord. In the morning will I direct my prayer unto thee, and will look up." This is in Psalms 5:3. And Daniel is another example. He held an important position in Babylon and then in Persia. And he was known by everyone, including his enemy, that he prays 3 times daily. I'm sure it was merely a meaningless habit of Daniel's, but it was his habit to continuously submitting himself to God and asking God's guidance on all his decisions. So for us in the 21st century, daily what we think and the decisions that we make and whom we devote ourselves to will determine our life experiences. Therefore, let us be like David. Let God hear our voice first thing in the morning. Let God's face be the first face we look at when we wake up. Happy Sabbath.